Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad you're joining us for what promises to be an exciting and informative session. I'm Beth Minio. I'm the director of the Center for Disability Studies here at the University of Delaware. Today's session came about in a most unusual way, right? Our presenters were scheduled to speak at the statewide Life Conference back in January, but illness prevented them from doing so. So as an alternative, we decided to host the session here. That opened up the session to people beyond those who were scheduled to attend the Life Conference, but we're also recording today's session, and we'll send a link to the hundreds of people who had hoped to hear our speakers at the conference. We've also extended the time frame a bit. They only had 75 minutes at the conference so that they can share even more information with you. Today's session is titled Enhancing Independence at Home Through Technology. And this is what's known as a hot topic. You're going to learn a lot about what's possible now and into the future. I'm going to give you some background about our speakers now. Madeline Laquer is an assistive technology specialist with the Delaware Assistive Technology Initiative, we call ourselves DATI, at the University of Delaware's Center for Disability Studies. In that role, Madeline helps individuals, families, and care teams identify tools and devices that support the user to accomplish their desired outcomes. A RESNA-credentialed assistive technology provider, Madeline holds a bachelor's degree from Arcadia University in medical science and education and a master's degree in education with a concentration in assistive technology from George Mason University. Before joining our team last year, Madeline worked for JEBS Human Services, a nonprofit human services agency providing assistive technology services to residents of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And that's how she became acquainted with our second presenter today. David Miller resides with his partner Chrissy in Narberth, Pennsylvania, where he's an active member of the community. He's a graduate of the Vocational Independence Program at the New York Institute of Technology. After graduating, he returned to Narberth, where he and his parents founded the Philadelphia Independence Program, or PIN. The PIN program is an independent living program for young adults with disabilities. David is a Special Olympics athlete and competes in several sports, including track and field, long-distance running, and basketball. So today's session is being captioned, and sign language interpretation is provided. If anyone in the audience needs additional assistance or support in accessing today's event, please let one of our team members know. You met them at the registration table on the way in, and Loretta is in the back table. The recording of today's event will also be available from the CDS website in the near future so that you can share it with others who are not able to attend today. After Madeline and David wrap up their prepared talk, we'll open things up for questions. If you wish to ask a question, please indicate that, and we will bring a microphone to you. Please wait for the mic to reach you so that all in the audience can hear your question. So please join me in welcoming Madeline and David.
Do you want to sit for this part?
What?
Do you want to stay seated?
Yeah, you go first.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Beth, for the lovely introduction. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today and share a topic that I am very passionate about, and that's smart home technology. I want to start with some objectives for our session today and what I hope you will leave here with. But first off, I want you to have a definition of what smart home technology is, be able to identify some of the common devices that are readily available out on the market, also have an understanding of the applications and the features and skills, And then lastly, David is going to be sharing his experience in using smart home technology. So before we begin on this journey, I think it would be best to start with a definition so we're all we all have the same understanding. When you hear the term smart home technology, it's really just referring to the group or network of devices that provide automation in your home. And by automation, that's referring to just making everyday tasks easier and more efficient. So they provide the user with a way to control their home environment. And that may be with tasks such as turning your lights on and off, controlling the temperature, so the climate in your home, perhaps kitchen appliances like a stove, and even your entertainment systems. But there are a number of devices that are considered smart, and I'm going to give you some examples. Most people are probably familiar with Alexa, as she's known by, but Alexa is actually a product of Amazon. And then within Amazon, the devices or line of devices are called Echo devices. So on the screen here, I have pictured an Echo Dot, which is approximately the size of a hamburger bun, I like to describe it as, but it's not very large. And so the Echo Dot is simply a smart speaker, and it has a number of buttons on it, particularly buttons for controlling the volume, turning the microphone on and off, as well as a power button. Now, the other Echo devices that are in that line are called the Show devices. The Echo Show devices are simply the touchscreen version, and they almost look like a tablet, but they have a speaker behind it, and there's also a camera embedded into the front of the Echo Show. And the reason why this was included when they released this model is because it allows for video chat, or also for a drop-in feature that we will talk about in a later slide. But in addition to these Echo Dots and Echo Show devices, Amazon also produces a number of other smart home devices. One of them is their ecobee, or smart thermostat. They also just recently released something called their Echo Hub. And if you're familiar with the security companies such as ADT, the Hub is really just a way for you to control all of your smart home devices through this touchscreen tablet. Now, for the purpose of our session today, we are going to be focusing on the Amazon Alexa products, or the Echo products, but please know that there are a number of other devices readily available in the retail market that you can purchase from box stores such as Target or Walmart, different retailers such as a phone retailer, particularly Verizon or AT&T. You can go in and purchase these smart speakers. Now, the other line of products that people are pretty familiar with are Google. So Google has their own devices. What's interesting is that they don't seem to be expanding their line of smart home devices, but in particular, the Nest Mini is the equivalent of the Echo Dot. So again, it's very small. It has just a number of buttons on it. There's no screen or camera. Now, they have their Nest Hub device, which does have a camera and a touch screen. A lot of people are also familiar with their Nest thermostat, which allows you to control your temperature and set a routine, which we will cover in a later slide. So before you even get started, I think there are some things that you should be aware of. And these are lessons that I have learned from working with clients in the field, in their home environments. And so what I often advise my clients is that you want to start with a task. What task do you want to be able to do independently? Is it something as simple as turning your lights on and off? Do you want to be able to unlock your front doors so a caregiver can come in? But you need to start there, because that can determine what devices that you're going to consider and how they're implemented. Another consideration is your Wi-Fi network. So, of course, when you start building out these smart home networks, you could quickly have 10 to 20 devices in your home. When you're talking about having multiple light bulbs in a room or smart plugs, and so that can start to bog down your home Wi-Fi network. And there are some tricks around that, such as potentially setting them up on a guest network to help increase the Wi-Fi speed, but it's something that you need to consider and make sure you have a strong Wi-Fi connection before you go and implement these devices, because you would not want them to fail or not work as efficiently as they should. I often tell folks that I'm working with that it doesn't make sense to go and purchase a number of devices as well. So rather than outfitting your whole home, it may make sense to just start out with 1 or 2 devices. And I often like to recommend implementing something like an Echo Dot in your bedroom, because think about it, you're sleeping and you don't want that screen, that blue light waking you up at night, but something like an Echo Show device might be well suited for your kitchen or maybe your living room where you spend a lot of time. So I often advise people to just start with 1 or 2 devices, maybe a smart plug or a smart bulb. But from there, you can certainly build your home, your smart home network. In addition to those tips, you also want to consider the placement of the device. So most of these smart speakers are designed to be used on a tabletop. So whether it's an end table, maybe your kitchen counters. Now that they are becoming so widely used, you will see a number of accessories that are also available. So I've seen some different shelves that can sit on your outlet to hold your device. So if you have very limited space, you may need to use something like that. There are also even brackets that you can put on your kitchen cabinet. So if you want to free up space on your kitchen counter, you could put your Echo Show device for cooking in that bracket. So just considering the placement is really important. You also want to consider who's going to be involved in the training. Is it going to be the individual, the actual user, and the family? Maybe there's a greater care team that you would like to be involved. Because at the end of the day, my role as an AT specialist is to fade out. And so I want to make sure that that individual has all the support that they need moving forward. Because if you are all probably familiar with smart devices and cell phones and tablets, these things can be very frustrating. And so for an individual with a disability, you want to make sure they have all the tools available to them. And so making sure to include those folks in the training as well. I'll mention it in a slide here in just a minute, the checklist. So there's a really wonderful checklist that was developed by the Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation. And if you're not familiar with them, they are a wonderful organization that started a Smart Homes Made Simple project some years ago, and they developed a checklist. But it helps you to think through areas of your home that you may want to utilize technology and how it could be implemented. So, for the Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation, they have a Smart Homes Made Simple blog where you can go and read about actual users, actual individuals who have implemented smart home tech and are using it as a way to increase their independence or to remain in their home. They have an assessment tool that is very comprehensive, and I'm going to share it on the next slide. I understand it is going to be very hard to read, but I can share this after the fact when we send out a follow-up email. So this is a really great tool for you to utilize if you don't have someone like an AT specialist or even just a technology whiz, someone who can support you. If you don't have that individual readily available to assist you with implementing smart home tech, this would be a really great tool for you to reference. So there are a number of devices that we could talk about, and of course with time constraints today, we can't get into all of the models and brands that are out there, and this is by no means a comprehensive and all-inclusive list. But there are smart home devices that are, of course we've talked about smart speakers, There are sensors such as a contact sensor or motion sensor, and in a later slide we'll talk about that and how you can implement it for security and safety in your home. But also just considering things like smartwatches. Most of you are probably familiar with an Apple Watch. There's also a Samsung version available as well, but those can be used in conjunction with these smart speakers for greater independence. They also are now coming out with a whole host of smart appliances. So whether it's a smart washer and dryer that's Alexa enabled, as well as different ovens. So in the event that you have someone who may be prone to walking away from the oven after they've turned it on, maybe they're struggling with memory or just being forgetful, know that that's available. So there's always new products coming out to the market. So what do we call Alexa? And the truth is that there are a number of names. So most people know her as Alexa, but she also has some other names. So if you are an individual who may have slurred speech, and maybe Alexa is just a name that's difficult for you to pronounce, there are some other ones. So when I'm talking about what do we call her, I'm referring to the wake word. So Alexa functions by using a wake word. So you have to use this word to activate her, to turn her on. And so the default name or wake word is Alexa. But other names that you can select during the setup phase are Echo, also computer, Amazon, and most recently Ziggy. And that's because of a collaboration that they have with the Zigbee smart home products. So even if you choose one of these names during setup, you can always change it later on. Nothing is ever set in stone with these smart home products. They have a degree of flexibility, which is why they're so wonderful. But for the setup phase, you will need access to a smartphone or a tablet. I've not seen anybody use a computer because you need to use an application called Alexa or Amazon Alexa. You'll see it sometimes in the App Store, but you can purchase this free app through the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, as well as the Amazon App Store. And from there, then you will move through the setup phase, which is pretty intuitive, but please know we have guides that we can share with you if you have any questions. But how does Alexa actually work? How does she function? And I get asked this question a lot. So the reason why I mentioned having a strong and reliable Wi-Fi connection is because that's how Alexa functions. So she needs internet to be activated. So when you are doing the initial setup, you are going to pair your device, your smart speaker, with your home Wi-Fi network. It could potentially also be used in a school setting or in an employment placement as well, but you have to connect to that Wi-Fi network. And then from there, every time you use the wake word, so let's say it is Alexa, and you ask her a question or give her a command, she sends that information, and she uses the internet to gather and pool that data. So maybe your question is about the weather. What is the weather for today? Or what's the weather, down in Florida the next week? She's going to pull that information from the internet. So that's why you have to have a strong and reliable Wi-Fi connection. But what I think a lot of people need support around is knowing what commands to even use with Alexa. And so Amazon has a really good guide for getting started and gives some wonderful recommendations for questions and how to phrase these commands. But you'll always start with the wake word, Alexa. And that can be a little bit tricky in getting used to the timing. I often see folks who will say Alexa and quickly give the command, but please know that it takes some time to get used to the phrasing. Another thing that I want to mention in regards to the wake word is often what will happen with these smart speakers is there will be a little bright light that flashes on the actual device. And so it's generally like a light blue color. And if you are an individual who may have low vision or total vision loss, or maybe you are positioned away from, thank you, Ron. If you are maybe positioned away from the smart speaker and you can't see it, there is a feature that's called start of request and end of request. And that, again, is something that you set up during the initial installation phase. And so when you enable that, the start of request, it makes this audible ding. And so you don't have to look and see if Alexa is waiting and ready for your command. You have this note, this alert that's telling you, okay, go ahead and you can give the command to Alexa. And so I really like to set that up for all the clients that I've worked with. Sometimes it is frustrating for people because you have this dinging and constant alerts going off every time she's triggered, but it also lets you know if you are concerned at all about security and privacy. It lets you know when the microphone is live and being used. So I want to spend a little bit of time also talking about access methods. So of course, we have talked about using voice commands, so communicating to Alexa verbally. But if you don't have the ability to communicate verbally, for whatever reason, there are alternate ways to access her or to trigger her. And I have worked with several individuals who've utilized different devices. But if we're talking about communication devices, whether it's something that's low tech or maybe more high tech, like an iPad or a dedicated device, I've worked with folks who have programmed the Alexa phrases into their device and then used them to access or to trigger Alexa. So for example, on your, in one of your page sets on a communication device, maybe you have a folder dedicated just to Alexa and her phrases, her commands. So in there, you would simply type out Alexa, comma, show me the front door, just as an example for a command. But it's all about how you type it in. And please know, too, when we mentioned before the placement of the device, that's where you have to remember if you are using a communication device to trigger Alexa, you have to be mindful of where you are in relation to that device. In addition to communication devices, you can also just simply type to Alexa. So if you are using a smartphone or a tablet and you have the Alexa app, you can go in and pull up the keyboard and type the command to her. And this is not just helpful for individuals with disabilities, but also think about families too who may have a sleeping baby at home and they don't want Alexa to get triggered. You could use it in that sense too. In addition to typing, there's something called the flick button, and that's what I have pictured on the screen here. But the flick button is about the size of a quarter. It's not very large, but these are buttons that have Bluetooth capability. And so they have three functions, if you will. So there's a single click, a double click, and then a long press. So you can place these flick buttons throughout your home to trigger Alexa. Now you do have to set this up through your smartphone with an application, but maybe using the flick button, maybe one click turns your light on and a double click turns your light off. So these flick buttons have been around for some time, and I've now seen variations of them coming out from other vendors, particularly Philips has one that's out there on the market now, but this is an alternative as well. So I want to spend quite a bit of time today talking about the common features and the skills and how you could use it for independent living. Most people are familiar with the environmental control, but if not, it's okay, we're going to talk about it. You can certainly use Alexa to make phone calls, control different appliances, different even vacuums and wet mops that are now available on the market. But there's a lot of devices that are constantly coming out that have these different features. So that's where we're going to start today. Device features. I like to share with people the difference between reminders versus alarms and how I've implemented them with former clients. So a reminder is something that will go off on your Alexa, on your smart speaker, and it'll go off a certain number of times. So you can decide how many times you'd like her to repeat that reminder. I think the default is generally 2 times, but you can have it repeat multiple times if needed. In addition to that, you can decide which smart speaker is going to alert you and provide that reminder. So maybe you just want it, in your bedroom or your bathroom, depending on the time of day, especially if it's related to medication management, or you could have it broadcasted throughout your home. If for some reason you are not home and you are relying on Alexa as a support for these reminders, whatever it may be, you can also have her send you a text message. So if you're out and about and you're getting really busy throughout your day, Alexa can send you a text message to remind you to take your medication. Or maybe it's something as simple as remembering to take a break, setting time aside to meditate or maybe drink some water. Those sort of alerts can come through as a text message as well. In addition to reminders, there are alarms. And alarms are a little bit different in that when you set them, they will continuously go off until you have disarmed it or turned it off with the command Alexa stop. And so for some people, they need that support and prefer to have an alarm set up as a reminder. So you could use these, like I mentioned, for a reminder to take your medication, maybe a reminder to start a load of laundry, or prep your lunch for the next day. Maybe you're working full time and you need to have that reminder to set your clothes out or even pack a lunch. Now, announcements are really neat in that they can be used different ways for an individual, for a whole family unit, but in particular, I've used these with families who may be providing kind of remote support to the individual. So maybe you have a young adult or an older adult who is living independently, and maybe you need to provide just a one-time notification of something. So you have these reminders and alarms that you maybe set up to go off on a recurring basis, but maybe you just need to give an alert one time. That's where announcements can come in. And you can set them up within the home. So maybe you go up to your Alexa device and you say, Alexa, make an announcement for, the fact that dinner's ready. But if you do not reside with that individual, or maybe you live in a different state and you're providing support remotely, you can set an announcement to go off in the home of the individual who's using that smart speaker. And so in addition to that, you can decide where it's going to be broadcasted, but generally the default is that it's going to broadcast to all of the devices throughout the home. So in remembering, the placement of the device, that's where you may want to consider, do I need to have a smart speaker in every in every room for something like an announcement? Now, phone calls. This is where I have a lot of questions from consumers that I've worked with. And unfortunately, Amazon has made some changes to phone calls and their requirements, if you will, around it. Initially, when these Alexa devices were first available on the market, you could call as many people as you needed to. So you could access any of your contacts. Unfortunately, Amazon has now pared back, and you are only allowed to call up to 10 people. So what I mean by that is when you are doing the installation phase and you are syncing your smartphone contacts with your speaker, you can only select up to 10 people. And I understand for some people that may be a drawback. And that's where you may need to consider other devices for that individual. But using Alexa, using these commands, you can make phone calls hands-free. And so then with the smart speaker that you have in your room, wherever you're making that phone call, you have live or two-way audio between the individual and the other person on the other end of the line. What I want to focus on is emergency services. I have a lot of questions over the years when I've worked with consumers about how can I call for help. So if you pair your phone contacts with Alexa, you can identify one person, unfortunately, just one individual, to be your emergency contact. And so when you have that person identified, if you use the command, Alexa, call for help, or Alexa, I need help, it's going to call that emergency contact and also send them a text message. And so this is still available as a free service through Alexa, but I also want to caution you and make you aware that there is a paid subscription or a paid version of this called the Alexa Together program. Now, for some individuals, this may make sense for them to subscribe to. The Alexa Together program, at the moment, it's $25 a month. But if you are needing emergency medical services at your home, you cannot call 911 through your smart speaker. So that is where the Alexa Together program comes in. So using or having this subscription lets you talk to a live agent in real time that'll connect you to your local emergency medical services. And the reason why they don't allow you to access 911 or make a phone call to 911 is in the event that your internet ever failed. But of course, you need to consider what other plans you're going to put in place for the individual. So in the event that they may be at a risk for falls or some other medical emergency, you don't want Alexa to be your main support. You want to have other layers to your plan. The drop-in feature is probably what's most popular in households, but also for family members that are living outside your home. The drop-in feature essentially functions like an intercom. And so you can do this between your devices, but also if you have a family member living in another town or another state and they also have Alexa devices, you can drop in on them. And so you have to give that person permission to drop in on you, but you do that through the settings in the app. So if you remember back to the difference between the Echo Dot, which is just a smart speaker with no screen, and then the Echo Show, that is also a smart speaker but has a screen and a camera, that's where you want to consider with something like the drop-in feature, do you need that camera? So if you are going to use the drop-in feature, having that camera lets you get live video feed of the room. And again, that's where when you're considering placement, if you're going to be using drop-in as a way to kind of check in on things, make sure the individual's doing okay, you're going to want to make sure that video feed or that camera is placed in a way that you have a good picture of the room. And so now that there are accessories available for these devices, there are different stands that let you adjust the angle of the Echo Show so you can get a better view of the room. But for the drop-in feature, particularly for those who are supporting you remotely, I have used it with individuals who maybe just need support throughout the day. Maybe they have a history of seizures and the individual's living independently and the family just wants peace of mind that everything's okay. If they can't get a hold of them via a text or a phone call, they're going to rightfully so be nervous and want to decide, do I need to run over the house and make sure things are okay? This is where Alexa can come in through the drop-in feature and you can quickly get an idea of what's going on. In addition to, if you have the Echo Show, if you have the live video feed, it's also two-way audio. And so the individual that's in the home does not have to do anything in terms of accepting the call or answering. It's going to be in real time immediately. But you do have to provide permission to that contact, to the individual, through the Alexa app. The Show and Tell is one that is a slightly new feature, and it's still improving. But For the show and tell feature, you would need an Echo Show device, so you need one that has the camera. But the show and tell feature allows an individual who may have vision loss to read printed text. And so an example of that would be a food label. So if you want to have soup for lunch that day, and maybe you want to decide between, Italian wedding soup and chicken noodle soup, and you don't have your phone available with one of those apps that can scan and read the text aloud to you, this is where you can use Alexa. And so you go up to the Echo Show with the camera, and you ask Alexa to tell you what's in your hands. And so she'll provide you a series of directions on how to position that device to make sure it's getting the best picture of what's in your hands, and then she's going to read it aloud to you. So this is something that can be used in the kitchen, potentially a bedroom, or other areas of your home, but it could read food products. It can scan barcodes. You could use it to read over-the-counter medication, potentially cleaning supplies. If you're worried about the individual potentially mixing up cleaning supplies and having some sort of chemical reaction, you could use this in that sense as well. Environmental control. So when we are talking about environmental control, we are referring to controlling aspects of the environment. So that could be the temperature or different devices in the home. But this is where we can bring in other products that may not be within the Amazon brand or the Alexa brand. And so on the screen here, I have pictured the Google Nest thermostat. And this is something that you would need an electrician to install because it is hardwired. But once you have it set up and wired, you pair it to your Wi-Fi network. And then using your smart speaker, you're able to control the temperature. So you can set it to heat or to cool, so air conditioning. You can also set up routines, which we'll cover in a later slide. But in addition to the smart thermostats, there are also a number of other devices. As I mentioned before, if you maybe have a caregiver who's coming into the home for their shift and you can't get out of bed to open the door for them, there are now smart locks that are fairly easy to install. And again, they use the internet, so you have to do that pairing initially during the installation phase. But there are so many models that are available, so it can be overwhelming when you're getting started. And that's why, going back to the checklist, it's so important to have a tool like that available. In addition to the smart locks, there are different game consoles. So if you have someone who is a big video gamer, I know for Xbox, that's something that you can turn on and off using those commands. Also, the Fire TVs and Rokus, you can turn off and turn on the TV, pick whatever streaming app that you're using, because I know a lot of us are now moving away from cable and going with streaming. You can do all of that through your commands. You can adjust the volume, turning it up and turning it down, and fast forward and rewind. All of those features can be controlled with a command. So safety and security is something that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. On the screen here, I have pictured a Ring video doorbell. And there are two versions of this, just kind of plainly speaking. There is a battery-operated version, and then one that is wired. And so I have found that a lot of clients that I've worked with over the years prefer the battery-operated version because you don't need to have an electrician come in to set it up and install it for you. The downside to using a battery-powered video doorbell is that it does tend to use up that battery pretty quickly because every time it's triggered, because of motion that's detected, it's going to use a little bit of that battery juice. Whereas if you have one that's wired directly, you have constant electricity running to it, and so you don't need to recharge it. And the the Ring video doorbell, the battery powered version, if you go with an older model, Those start at about $100. And I understand for some people that may not be possible to purchase a smart home device like that at that price point, but it is much more affordable than some of the other versions, the newer versions that are out there on the market. In addition to these video doorbells, there are also smart speakers, or contact sensors is what I mean to say. So contact sensors are really small. They are not much bigger than a box of matches, just for comparison, but they come in two pieces. So one piece goes on the door frame, and then the other piece goes on the actual door. But they are generally placed on the interior side of the door. And the reason why these are helpful for independent living is if you have someone who may be prone to eloping, or maybe someone who is, in the early stages of Alzheimer's, that may be just, again, prone to walking out of the home, these contact sensors can alert you when the front door is opened. They can also be placed on windows. So if you want to know every time the window is opened, it can alert you as well. Now, I understand that can be overwhelming. Getting these alerts and being bombarded with notifications throughout the day, that can be a lot for someone to handle. And so you can, of course, set restrictions and adjust the settings as needed for how often you would like to be alerted. In addition to the contact sensors, there are also motion sensors. So if you would like to be alerted, anytime there's motion detected outside your front door, you can get an alert. So maybe you want to know when a caregiver is coming and going from your home. That's where a motion sensor can be used. But please know, with the Ring video doorbells, they have a motion sensor embedded in them. So they can detect motion or when an individual is at the front door, but sometimes they can be extremely sensitive. So that's where you may need to go in and adjust the settings. So maybe you don't want to be alerted to all of the traffic that's on the road. Maybe you just want it to alert you, if someone's on your front porch. Those are things that you need to consider as well. And I also want to make note about the commands for the video doorbell. So when you have them paired with the Amazon Echo Show, the one with the camera, you can use the command, Alexa, show me the front door. And so you can get live video feed of who is at your front door. Now remember, going back to our consideration of the Wi-Fi network, you want to make sure you have strong, reliable internet for this, because sometimes there will be a lag with that video feed. Now the other command, there's Alexa, show me the front door, and then Alexa, answer the front door. So I've worked with individuals over the years who have pretty significant vision loss or total vision loss, and they are living alone. They are nervous to answer their front door, and they had an Amazon Echo Show in their home. Now, if you're imagining these touchscreen devices, it may be really difficult or impossible for that person to use that Echo Show and pull up the video feed and unmute the microphone and do that all really quickly. Unfortunately, these Echo Show devices, they have what's called a screen reader built in, but it's not very good compared to some of the other screen readers that are out there on the market. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you use the command, Alexa, answer the front door, what happens is that you now have unmuted the microphone. And so it's then live two-way audio between the individual in the home and the visitor at the front door. So you can quickly identify and figure out who it is, and then you can tell, is this the person who's coming to drop off my groceries? Is this my nurse who's popping in? And you feel a little bit better about answering the front door. But please know that this is just, one layer of security, and you have to consider other options as well. So for routines, I like to mention these because this is where the automation part of smart home tech comes in. So these are really, really neat because they can be implemented in a couple different ways. And so what people most often use routines for are around their lights. So for example, maybe you want the lights to come on at sunset every day, So maybe you want your front porch light to come on at sunset and then turn off at sunrise. And that adjusts based on the time of year. It's smart like that. So you have this routine for lights, but you can also use it in other ways too. Maybe you want the lights to come on inside your home when you're arriving home from work each day. This is where Alexa, if you give her permission, can use the location of your phone. And so if she detects that you're approaching your home address, then she can turn the lights on for you. So when you're going to open your front door, you're not fumbling in the dark trying to figure out where the lock is, and when you're bringing your bags in, you get busy, and this is something that can be really helpful for a lot of folks. In addition to the lights, you can also implement routines around your smart thermostat. So maybe you're going to be out of the home for part of the day, and you don't need the temperature, for example, the AC, to be running during that time period. So you could set a routine for your AC to the temperature to rise throughout the day, and then for it to cool later at night when you return from home. But this is why these Amazon or Alexa devices are so flexible. They can really meet the needs of the individual, and you have to consider, again, what task you're wanting to do and take it from there. So David and I will talk a little bit about the work that we did together around his smart home devices in regards to cooking. But you can use these smart speakers to create shopping lists. So you can do it verbally, communicating verbally and telling Alexa to, for example, add bananas to your shopping list, or milk or eggs, whatever it may be. Again, you can also use it by typing in the Alexa app, or even using your communication device to add these items to a shopping list. But what's really interesting is that you can share this shopping list with whoever is doing the shopping in your home. So maybe it's a caregiver, maybe it's your spouse. You can share it with them, and so they can have just a copy of the list, or they can have a list that looks a little bit similar to what's on the screen here. And I understand, again, that it may be difficult for you to see, but with this list, you have a series of check boxes that are to the left of each item. And so when you're shopping in the store, you can pull this up on your phone and check it off when you've acquired the item, when you've put it in your cart, and move on. Another nice feature of the shopping list is that it organizes it based on grocery department. So whether it's meat, dairy, or produce, just makes your life a little bit easier when you're shopping in the store, helping you to get in and out of the store faster. Something new that they recently added is, let's say you've started a list on paper, you've written it by hand. You can now take a photo of that printed list and have that converted to your, in your Alexa app in the shopping list version. So cooking, this is something that David and I will talk about, as I mentioned, in just a little bit here. But I love what you can do with the Echo Show devices in cooking. So remember, the Echo Show devices, they're a touchscreen version as well as a camera. Now, imagine yourself cooking in the kitchen, your hands are messy, they're covered, and you can't access, a cookbook. This is where Alexa is really helpful, because you can pull up any sort of recipe that you're needing and do it all through your preferred access method. So if it's by voice or a communication device, from there, Alexa's going to read you step by step what you need to do in that recipe. You can ask her at any time for the ingredients. She can do conversions for you pretty quickly. So maybe you're going to double that recipe and you can't do that math pretty quickly. She can do the conversion for you. Also, let's say you find a recipe that you want to cook next week for dinner. When you have that recipe up on the Echo Show, you can add all those ingredients easily to your shopping list by just a click of the button. And so when David and I worked together over the course of several months with his smart home, we were searching for recipes in advance and making sure he had the ingredients ready to go. and we'll talk a little bit about how we implemented this. But in addition to having these step-by-step instructions and the ease of adding the ingredients to your shopping list, what I really appreciated about Alexa is that she can show you how to prepare something or a specific cooking skill that you might not be familiar with. So just as an example, let's say you've never minced garlic before. You don't know how to mince garlic, or you don't know how to cut a mango. You can ask Alexa to show you how to cut a mango. And so she's gonna pull up a video that you can watch and you can listen to, and she's gonna give you step-by-step instructions of how to do that. So for individuals who may be just starting to get used to cooking on their own, maybe they're living independently for the first time, this is a support that they can access through Alexa. So I want to also mention some of the accessibility features that she has. And this is something that Amazon continues to expand and develop as new features are coming out and different skills. But in the last few years, they released something that's called adaptive listening. So as I mentioned before, it takes a little bit of practice to get used to the timing and how to give the command, Alexa, add bananas to my shopping list. And so they now have created what's called adaptive listening mode, where they're going to give you a little bit of extra time to provide that command before the microphone shuts off. And so for some individuals who may be planning what they need to say, what command they want to give, this can be a really helpful feature. In addition to this, and I don't have it on the slide, but now there's something called follow-up mode. So of course it can be very tiring every time you have to say Alexa and trigger her. So because these Echo devices have sensors built into them, if they detect that you're still standing in front of that smart speaker, it will keep the mic running so that way you can provide another command. So if you're thinking, just as an example, in regards to a grocery list, right? You're firing off all the ingredients or all the items that you need to pick up at the grocery store. It's gonna be very taxing and tiring to say Alexa every single time you wanna add an item to that grocery list. So with the follow-up mode, when you enable that, she's gonna wait and listen for you, and you can just provide additional items that you want to add or commands that you need to give her without using that wake word to trigger her. In addition to the adaptive listening, she also has captioning and real-time text. So when we talk about video calls, so of course you can have a video chat through the Echo Show devices because of the camera and the screen. If you are an individual who's deaf or hard of hearing and you may communicate using ASL, you can, of course, you have the video chat, but also you have the captioning there too. So if you are someone who is hard of hearing, you have the captioning appearing on the screen there, and you can read the conversation as it's going on. As I mentioned before, for the access methods, if you don't communicate verbally, you do also have the option to type out commands to her and execute it that way. And then, of course, the hands-free calling and texting, that's another way they provide that added accessibility to their devices. I also want to mention, too, some considerations for implementing this as a whole support team or care team. As I mentioned before, it's really important to consider the individual's goals. They have to be front and centered in this process. So we don't want to see teams thinking that, oh, this is a really great technology, let's go ahead and implement it. You need to have the buy-in and the input from the individual, from the actual user, to make sure they feel comfortable with this, because we're talking about speakers and cameras that we're going to implement in their home environment, and they may not want that, and that's perfectly fine. That's their right. And so we want to make sure that they are included in this process from start to finish. But you have to consider the goals. So what do they want to be able to do independently? From there, as I mentioned before, with the training aspect, eventually, if you have an AT specialist that you are working with, eventually we're going to step out and the individual is going to take this and hopefully flourish, but we want to make sure they have tools available and guides to help them troubleshoot. So if we are including other members of the care team, the support team in that setup process and the installation and the training, they're going to be there after the fact to support that individual, to use the technology to troubleshoot and figure out issues as they arise. And then it's also important to consider a plan for regular maintenance and software updates. Luckily, with the Alexa devices, you can update them, the actual device, not the app. You can update the device by using a command. So you can ask her to check for updates and have her check for the most recent software to see if there's something that's been released. And this all helps to ensure your device is going to operate smoothly and efficiently. Just like our phones and our tablets need software updates, so does Alexa. And then another thing I like to discuss as a team is the security aspect of using Alexa, and of course with passwords. So I think it's something that has to be considered because, again, the individual may not be comfortable with implementing cameras, but maybe they just want to have a smart speaker in their home or a sensor. You have to ask them what they're comfortable with. And then, of course, since you have this app, you now have a username and a password. So you want to make sure that that information is being stored securely and only the user has access to it or whoever is supporting them. So maybe it's a nurse or a family member that has that information as a backup if they were to ever get locked out of their account. So now I am excited to turn this over to David. David's going to share his story.
Grab them really quickly. Grab them so quickly.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I can hold it. I can hold it.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Miller. I am happy to be here with all of you today. I want to share a little bit about myself with all of you. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am a triplet. I have two brothers, Jonathan and Daniel. At a young age, I was diagnosed with a developmental disability. Later, I was diagnosed with ADD and dyslexia. I am a founding member of the Philadelphia Independent Network. I graduated from the Vocational Independent Program at the New York Institute of Technology in 2008. After graduating from NYIT, I continue living in New York, but I moved my family back in Pennsylvania. I had a goal to live independently in my own home, but I wanted to get closer to my family and friends. Together with my parents and several other families, we founded the Philadelphia Independence Network program in Norwood, Pennsylvania in 2012. I had a girlfriend named Chrissy who I lived with in Norwood. We have been together for almost 8 years and have shared a home for 5 years. I have been working at a local Wawa since 2017, where I work as a customer service associate. In addition, to work at Wawa, I am a Special Olympic athlete. I have been a member of the organization since 2014. I competed in multiple sports, including track and field, long distance running, and basketball. I have qualified for the state games 7 out of the 10 years. I've been an athlete. Madeline and I have started working together in 2018 through the PIN program. The PIN program has 3 main components: employment support, special living, of independent living and social activities. Madeline worked with me and other PIN members to provide employment support. I use assistive technology to help me with everyday tasks. I use my smartphone, Apple Watch, and Amazon Alexa. I use my Apple Watch for reading, writing notes, and tracking my health and fitness. The Apple Watch helps me to keep track of my steps and complete exercise routines. I am now going to turn it back over to Madeline to continue the presentation.
Stay up here.
Yeah, I do have one, so bad. Oh, that's me.
So, as David mentioned, he is one of the founding members of the Philadelphia Independence Network, or PIN. PIN is a program of JEV's Human Services, and it was founded in 2012 by a group of families with young adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And these adults all had a goal to live independently. And so in the initial planning phase, they decided to found this program in the town of Narberth, Pennsylvania. And it was intentional because the town of Narberth had access to the SEPTA train line because a number of, the majority of the members of the program do not drive. And so they relied on the train and buses to get them to and from work, as well as any community outings. But as David mentioned, there are three core components of the program, and that's initially David and I work together through the employment portion of the program. But the program has roughly 30 members at any given time. They all live independently in their own home, but they receive support from staff to complete everyday tasks. And so that looks very different for every individual. It could be going out to the grocery store once a week with staff, planning out their meals. It could be maybe setting up a medication management system, scheduling doctor's appointments, but again, it looks different for every individual. In addition to the independent living support, it's required that every member of the program either be volunteering in some sort of position or also working in a paid position. So that's a requirement to be a member of the program. But lastly, there is the social aspect. So every month there is a number of events that members can participate in that are out in the community. In addition, they also have weekly employment support groups and life skill groups. And David, of course, has been a member since the very beginning and continues to live in Narberth. But I want to share a little bit about the work that we did together. So through a very generous grant from the Zweig Foundation, we were able to provide smart home technology to a number of individuals who had a goal to live independently in their home. And so we identified David and his partner, Chrissy, as being a potential candidate for using smart home tech. And of course, there was an evaluation that was conducted as the very first step to see what was needed. What were the goals that David and Chrissy, his partner, what did they want to be able to accomplish? And then, of course, the implementation phase, the training and installation that would be needed. And so David, as he mentioned, has worked for a local Wawa for many, many years. And so David really is passionate about cooking, but has not had the opportunity to gain those skills. And so he really was interested in making hoagies. And he can share with you, when we get to the question and answer portion, his goals and aspirations around that. But it made sense that we maybe start with cooking within his home. so that he became comfortable with, the different equipment and tools that were involved. And he's in an environment where he feels supported with me as the assistive technology specialist, but also with his partner, Chrissy. And so for the very first few months, and Dave can attest to this, we had weekly cooking nights. And so I would go in around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening, and we would prep dinner for that night. And so David and his girlfriend, Chrissy, would decide the week prior, what are we going to cook next week with Madeline? And so it was some variation of, a dinner entree or a casserole, but it was beyond frozen meals or quickly prepared meals. We're really focusing on those cooking skills that are involved in preparing a meal. So we had weekly cooking nights for months, and then from there started to phase out, and we were probably doing a cooking night every other week for some time. But in conjunction with these cooking nights, we were certainly using Alexa. So they'd pick out the recipe through their Echo Show device, add all the ingredients to their shopping list, have them ready to go for the next cooking night, and then we would get to cooking, and we had a lot of fun doing it. So, of course, we were doing this hands-on portion, but we were also listening to music, and it was just a really fun experience for all of us. From here, David and his partner continue to implement Alexa in their home. Of course, they use her for other tasks as well. David can speak to this later, but I know when we initially implemented them, he was using it just for reminders to, pack his lunch and, get ready, pull his things together to get ready for the train to take it to work. So there's so many ways that you can use Alexa, and it's not just dedicated to one task or one activity. But in addition to Alexa, of course, we were using other assistive technology tools. So David had these protective gloves that he would regularly wear and finger guards because if we're doing any sort of chopping, slicing, and dicing, we want to make sure that we're well protected. And you can probably see here in the photo, this is David. This was during the height of the pandemic, and so it was really important during that time that our members felt comfortable, they had meals prepared. We just wanted to make sure we were covering all of our bases. So I think David can speak to this too, but you certainly felt comfortable having these weekly cooking nights during that time. But after I started to phase out, of course, we were still available. I was still available for support because things are going to come up, as I mentioned, with software updates and different troubleshooting that may be needed. So I was available for some time. Now, luckily, after my time ended at Jev's, we had another AT specialist, and that person is still a support to David and his partner, Chrissy. And now we would love to open it up to questions, and for myself or for David. So Dave, if you want to come up here for either of us. And for the question and answer session, I will repeat the questions, and just as a reminder, wait until the microphone is to you, so that way it's captured.
Hi, thanks so much for this today. I'm wondering if there is a benefit, you think, to using Alexa or Google through the network with the internet versus having a separate device. And I was thinking about it when you gave the example about the unlocking door. So nowadays there's a lot of door locks that are, can be keypads or something like that. It doesn't require the internet, doesn't require. So do you think there's a benefit to having it connected to that network, or are the individual devices also equally valuable?
That's a good question. I do think there is a benefit to having it connect to the internet, but I have certainly worked with folks who do not have access to internet, and so that is very limiting, and we can't implement tech like this, and we have to consider other options. So yes. Yeah.
Hi, I'm in a unique situation. My sister is in a nursing home. And I tried to install and apply Google's Nest. The problem was I had to set it up under my account. And then when I went to implement it at the nursing home, I couldn't connect to their internet. So that was a waste of my time. I did it again with Alexa, with the Alexa, and that didn't work either. So my last option that I had, my sister is legally blind, has some memory problems, and she also has hearing loss. So my next venture was I called the blind site. They addressed, they recommended me trying the LLS products, and I ended up buying a voice command, name and number, answer, please call, all of that. I'm having some success, but not a lot, because there's issues with keeping the adapter plugged into the darn outlet, and I keep buying things and returning things and buying things. So it's been a very long struggle for me in the past 2 months. So I don't know, unless I need my own personal IT person to help me set it up at the facility, because of course there's no time for the staff members. They don't have that time. I did have one nurse that was, knowledgeable enough about Alexa, but she's not available all the time, and she doesn't have the time. So I've been struggling, and it's been frustrating, and it's frustrating for my sister because I wanted to maintain some measure of quality of life for her to keep in touch with family and friends while she is living there. And it's a long-term care situation. So I'm in a dilemma.
Sure. And I have a couple thoughts about this. So related to nursing home facilities or rehab facilities, there are sometimes restrictions around connecting these types of devices to their Wi-Fi network, and you will have to find out first if you're allowed to do that. So oftentimes there's a Wi-Fi network for employees to use, and then maybe a guest network for visitors. Those tend to be a lot slower and can get bogged down pretty quickly if you have a lot of visitors using it for their phones while they're at the facility. So you'd have to find out that first. But from there, if you're still looking to implement it, install it in the facility, one thing I failed to mention is wherever the Alexa device is going to live, it's best to set it up in that space, so with that network. So you can't necessarily set it up at your house and then take it to another home with a totally different Wi-Fi network. The only kind of exception to this is if you ever needed to unplug your device and move it to another room in your house, it's okay to do that because it will reconnect to your Wi-Fi network and start working as it should. But if you're installing it in your home and then taking it to the facility, that's where you will run into an issue. But we have a really great guide that we can share with you for setup. But please know, the benefit of me working at DATI is that I can support residents throughout the whole state of Delaware, and so there may be some things that I could help you to do remotely and just answer some questions about troubleshooting.
As a backup for her to manage the buttons.
Yep,
And she has a difficult time seeing the buttons.
sure.
No matter how big the button is. I mean, I got her big button phones, you know, and it's still a difficult task for her.
So maybe after the presentation today, if you have time, we can get your contact information and follow up with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Oh,
okay.
Haley.
Good afternoon.
Oh,
Good afternoon. My name is Patience Cannon. I'm from the Caregiver Resource Center of Easter Seals. And just as a question, how would this process look for someone desiring to do that? Like how long, what is necessary for the intake process, and about how much time does it take to actually get someone set up in their home with these devices, as long as the training and all that goes?
So I want to be clear here that the installation phase that we're talking about and, you know, purchasing this equipment, generally speaking, these are individuals who can pay for it out of pocket. Unfortunately, it's not something that would be covered by insurance. Sometimes there are grants like the one that David and I worked under, you know, at a local level to provide the technology and the support from, you know, the specialist. But if let's say we have an individual who's paid for the devices out of pocket, you know, an Echo Dot and an Echo Show, and now they need to implement it. It's hard to say how long the person will need training for, because it's going to be customized to that individual. And so it could be a couple weeks, it could potentially be a couple months. But of course, you're always going to have that ongoing support even after the training is done. So whether that's the individual who installed the equipment or someone else that you've identified, you know, on the care team, that person, you know, needs to be available to address issues as they come up. So it's hard to say. It's going to vary by individual. Mm-hmm.
Hi, David. Thank you for sharing today. Besides cooking, what other things do you use Alexa for at home? Can you share some examples?
Haley's question is, besides cooking, what other things do you use Alexa for at home?
You can for your alarm clock to wake up. Use it to play music, like I like to listen to music because I listen to her music. I don't use it often, but when I do use music, I use it. So, and the alarm clock and what the weather gonna be like on a weekly weather report and Sunshine News.
I think it's probably fair to say that Chrissy still does a lot of the cooking.
She does, and most of the music is from her. But once in a while, I listen to Meek Mill or stuff like that, I share can listen to. So, once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Some people? Okay.
Of the devices that you use, which one is your favorite?
Oh,
Well,
for me or for David?
For David.
Oh, go ahead, David.
does the PlayStation 5 count? My phone, we're getting older, getting a new one soon. And I love using my Apple Watch and my AirPods and my iPad. So.
Something that David did not share is that you often use your smartwatch for training for the Special Olympics.
Yeah, a lot. A lot of them. This is someone from Easter Seals? Someone who works at Easter Seals, I used to go there for rehab when I was a very little kid. Like, very little, so kind of cool. So, I told my mom, and like, she won't know who you are because you're too little, so it's kind of cool, so. Oh, okay.
Here's another idea or a question. David, you got these devices later on in your life, correct?
Yes.
Would you think that if you were able to use some of these devices while you were still in school, and school could have helped you with some of these devices as part of a practice and vocational practice, would that have made any difference?
Major difference. Sometimes I see things now like, man, that was like that 10, 15 years ago in what I see. Yeah, things could be a whole lot different. So, especially now, with new stuff coming out, like showing out there in 28 or 2007, but it's still cool though. Yeah, good question. Yeah, good question. Very good question.
And if there's anyone who has a particular question that maybe they would like to talk about with me directly, I will be here for some time after the presentation, and I'd be happy to take any contact information to follow up with you afterwards. And if we don't have any other questions, I would just want to thank you all for coming today and learning about smart home technology. I hope it was beneficial for you, and you now are aware of all the uses and potential benefits for those you work with or know. Thank you.
Thank you guys.